I was babysitting my niece one night while her parents were out for a well-deserved date night. They lived in the basement of an old house, where the low ceilings and dim lighting gave everything a heavy shadowed look. At first, things were fine. She was laughing, pushing her toy car across the carpet, making little room sounds as it skidded along. I watched her, amused, letting her energy fill the quiet room. But then, mid-laugh, she froze. Her gaze drifted to an empty corner across the room, her mouth slowly opening as if she had seen something terrible. Then, without warning, she started screaming. The sound was raw, piercing, as if she were in pain. She scrambled into my lap, clawing at my shirt, her little fingers trembling. I held her tightly, feeling her heart pound against mine as she buried her face in my shoulder. Her cries echoed off the walls, and I tried to calm her. I found myself glancing at the corner too, feeling a creeping sense of dread that had no reason to be there. "Ellie, there's nothing there," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady as I rocked her gently in my arms. She clung to me, her tiny fist clutching my shirt as her eyes stayed locked on the dark, empty corner. I looked over again, forcing myself to focus, trying to see what could possibly be frightening her so much. Shadows lingered there, but nothing more. I kept speaking softly, and after a while her grip loosened, her cries quieting to small hiccups as her gaze finally drifted back to me. I breathed a small sigh of relief and turned her away from that corner, cradling her head against my shoulder and talking about her favorite toys, anything to distract her. But then, her little body tensed and her gaze snapped back over my shoulder to that same spot. This time her scream was louder, more desperate, a sound that cut through me. She struggled in my arms, twisting to look at the corner as if something was reaching out, pulling her in. Her gaze was fixed on the exact same spot, unwavering, wide with terror. Against all my better judgment, I turned to look, my eyes following hers to the empty shadowed corner. The basement light buzzed softly, casting light shadows, but there was nothing. Only the bare wall and darkened space where two edges met. Yet, as I stared, goosebumps prickled at my arms and across the back of my neck. Ellie's little fingers dug into me, clutching with surprising strength, her nails pressing almost painfully into my skin. Her whole body was tense, coiled with fear I couldn't explain away. They say children are more sensitive to things we've long since blocked out, that they see what we can't, that they're open to things beyond understanding. The thought crept into my mind, gnawing at my sense of reason, and with it, a cold, uneasy fear took root. I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear or feel anything, but the look on Ellie's face told me she was seeing something that I couldn't, something that terrified her down to her core. I decided it would be best to take her upstairs, so I grabbed a few of her toys and we left, heading upstairs to the living room. The stairs creaked as we climbed, Ellie clinging to me, her head buried into my shoulder as if hiding from whatever had haunted that corner. I kept talking, my voice low and steady, hoping it would keep us both calm. By the time we reached the living room, her grip had relaxed and I was able to set her down gently on the couch. I turned on the TV and put on Dora the Explorer, her favorite. Slowly, she seemed to forget about the basement, her eyes brightening as she started singing along with the familiar theme song. Relief washed over me as she began to play with her toys again, her laughter filling the room and pushing the eerie silence from my mind. I headed into the kitchen, glancing back occasionally to make sure that she was okay. Opening the cupboard, I grabbed a can of soup and popped it into the microwave. The soft hum of the microwave was oddly comforting, grounding me after the strange, tense moments in the basement. Just as the timer ticked down, I heard a faint, familiar sound, a quiet whimper from the living room. I turned around, and there was Ellie, standing frozen in front of the TV, her wide eyes staring back down the hall towards the basement door. I rushed over, glancing down the hall into the empty darkness lingering at the top of the basement stairs. The shadows seemed thicker somehow, pressing against the doorway like a solid weight. For Ellie's sake, I tried to stay calm, smiling as I knelt down and reassured her, even though my voice felt shaky. "Let me just close the door, alright?" I said, my words more for my own reassurance than hers. I headed down the hall, each step making my pulse quicken. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was only spooked because of Ellie's fear, but the closer I got, the heavier the air seemed to grow. I reached the door and swung it shut, feeling the weight of it as it clicked into place. I tested the latch, making sure it wouldn't swing open. Turning back, I forced a smile, hoping she couldn't see the uncertainty in my eyes. "There's nothing to worry about, Ellie. Uncle Mikey's got you. You're safe." But even as I said it, a chill ran through me, the words feeling hollow. I could feel something lingering in the silence behind me, something I couldn't see but somehow knew was there. We settled into the routine, Dora the Explorer playing in the background as Ellie sipped her soup, seeming more like her usual self, her earlier terror fading with each spoonful. I relaxed a bit too, thinking maybe it had all been a child's imagination running wild. Then my phone buzzed, breaking the comfortable lull. It was a text from my sister, checking in, asking how things were going and if I wouldn't mind switching the laundry over. I smiled, telling her that we were fine, that Ellie was loving her Dora marathon and her SpaghettiOs. After a moment, I texted back, asking where the washer and dryer were, hoping it was somewhere upstairs. Her reply came moments later, casual as it could be. "In the basement, by the shower." I sighed and replied, "Sure, I'll get it done." Almost instantly, my sister sent back another message. "Thanks, you're the best brother." Her message brought a smile to my face, a warmth that helped push back the unease simmering beneath the surface. But as soon as I looked up, my gaze landed back on the basement door, standing there like a silent challenge. I knew I couldn't avoid it, so I took a deep breath and stood, telling Ellie to stay put and keep watching her show. She gave a little nod, her attention glued to the screen, and I headed towards the basement door. I opened it, stepping into the stairwell, and as I descended, that unsettling chill crept back up my spine, my skin prickling as though the shadows themselves were brushing against me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself how ridiculous it was, how there was absolutely nothing to fear. "Get a grip," I muttered under my breath, gripping the railing tightly. I was an adult, for crying out loud. The darkness has lost its hold on me years ago, so why was I letting it crawl back now? Each step down felt heavier, as if I was walking deeper into some unspoken dread waiting at the bottom of those stairs. I flipped on every light switch I could find as I stepped into the basement, flooding the room with harsh, flickering lights. The hum of bulbs felt oddly comforting, like a barrier against the silence that had settled here. The shadows shrank away into the corners, giving the basement an almost normal look. For a moment, I managed to shake off the tension, focusing on the rhythmic task of moving damp clothes from the washer to the dryer. But then, just as I was nearing the bottom of the pile, a strange, uneasy feeling crept back in, sinking deep into my bones. Goosebumps prickled across my arms, and a chill slithered up my spine, like 1,000 tiny legs scurrying up my back. I froze, my fingers gripping the last damp shirt. My breath caught in my throat. The lights overhead flickered slightly, and the sensation grew stronger, heavier, as if something just beyond my sight was watching, waiting for me to turn around. I moved as quickly as I could towards the doorway, every step feeling like I was being watched, shadows stretching to reach me. Just as I was about to escape, a sound stopped me in my tracks. The unmistakable slow rhythm of breathing coming from behind. My heart thundered, almost drowning it out, but the sound was still there. Steady, coming from the direction of the shower. I froze, every instinct telling me to run, but something stronger. Curiosity, dread, something unnameable held me in place. Slowly I turned, my legs shaky, the adrenaline making my entire body feel like it might give out. And then, I saw it. A figure crouched near the shower in the dim light, a mass of pure shadow, darker than anything around it, a silhouette that seemed to absorb the darkness itself. It looked twisted, almost monstrous, something that shouldn't exist in this world. In an instant, it began crawling towards me, its movement jerky and unnatural, closing the distance with terrifying speed. A scream tore from my throat, and I spun around, racing up the stairs. Just as I reached the first step, something icy and firm wrapped around my ankle, yanking me back. I crashed into the stairs, pain shooting through me, but I scrambled forward, clawing my way up, desperate to escape. I didn't dare look back, focusing only on reaching the top. My heart pounded louder than my own footsteps. I burst through the top of the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind me with a force that rattled the walls. I collapsed against it, pressing my back to the door as if my weight alone could keep whatever was down there from following me. My chest heaved, each breath shallow and panicked as I braced myself for the sound of something clawing or pounding from the other side. But there was only silence. "Uncle Mikey?" Ellie's small voice drifted over from the hallway. She stood there, watching me with wide, innocent eyes, clutching her favorite stuffed toy. Her expression was filled with concern as she tilted her head. "Are you okay?" I swallowed hard, trying to force a smile as I pulled myself together. "Yeah, I'm fine, Ellie. Just got spooked by a big old spider." I tried to laugh and she giggled, her laughter light and carefree. "Silly Uncle Mikey," she said, shaking her head, and her laughter drew a weak chuckle from me, too, though inside I was still shaken to my core. I stood up, double-checking that the door was securely locked, then picked her up, holding her close. "Come on, let's go back to the living room," I said, my voice steadier now, but my grip on her was tighter than before. The rest of the night passed without incident, but the silence felt heavy, as if something were waiting, lurking just out of sight. When my sister and her husband finally returned, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I couldn't get out of there fast enough, but as I gathered my things, my sister pulled me aside. "How'd it go?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes searching. I forced a smile, saying it was fine, that Ellie was an angel, but she didn't buy it. She watched me closely, picking up on the tension I had managed to shake off. "Did something happen?" she pressed gently, and after a moment I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the night settled heavily on my shoulders. I told her everything, hesitating before recounting how Ellie had screamed at something unseen in the corner of the basement. As I spoke, I saw a flicker of recognition across her face. My sister went pale, her gaze shifting uncomfortably as she admitted that Ellie had done the exact same thing a few weeks before. Freezing, staring, screaming as though she had seen something no one else could. She had brushed it off as a nightmare, but now, with both of us having experienced it, the reality felt too close, too real. I hesitated, then asked if she'd ever experienced anything strange down in the basement herself. I confessed that while I was down there changing the laundry, I could have sworn I saw something. A shadow or figure lurking in the darkness. My sister's face tightened, her expression thoughtful, but she shook her head. "No, not me," she replied slowly. "Just Ellie. She's done it a few times, getting really scared, staring at, well, that corner. My heart skipped a beat as her words sank in. The corner. The exact same one that had terrified Ellie tonight. It wasn't one unsettling moment. It had been happening over and over, and my mind raced, a horrible understanding dawning. Whatever Ellie had seen wasn't just in her imagination. It was something real. Something hiding just beyond the reach of the light, waiting in the shadows of that corner. A strange, uneasy feeling kept me rooted in place as I wrestled with the urge to leave. Part of me wanted to run, put as much distance as possible between myself and that basement, but another part felt a deep, gnawing worry for my sister and niece. My sister reassured me, brushing off my concern, telling me that they'd be fine. With a reluctant nod, I finally left, hoping that maybe I just overreacted, that it was my imagination playing tricks on me. Back in the familiar safety of my own home, the tension slowly unwound. The silence was comforting now, and I started to feel grounded again. I decided a hot shower would help wash away the last of the eerie feelings, so I turned on the water and let it cascade down, the steam filling the bathroom like a warm cocoon. As the water ran over my back, a sudden stinging cut through the heat, sharp and burning against my skin. Frowning, I looked down, twisting to see the back of my leg, and my stomach dropped. 4 wide, deep red scratch marks trailed down my calf, raw and unmistakable, as if something had clawed me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, a cold dread settling into my bones. Whatever I saw in the basement hadn't been my imagination. It was real. Something lurking in those shadows, something that could reach out and leave marks. And it was still there, left behind in that dark corner with my sister and my niece, hidden in the same shadows Ellie had stared at in terror. A shiver ran down my spine, the fear clawing its way up, sharp and unrelenting. I wanted to believe it was over, that whatever had happened was just my mind playing tricks, but the evidence was there, raw and unmistakable, carved into my skin like a warning. It was the first Saturday of October, and my boyfriend and I found ourselves at the entrance to Twilight Creek's farm, a maze in corn maze. It was around 4 p.m., and the sun had just begun to dip towards the horizon. The air had a crisp autumn chill, hinting at a cold night. A cardboard cutout stood at the entrance of the cartoony ear of corn, grinning widely. Yes, it was clear that the intended demographic for this maze was about 2 decades younger than us. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Tyler asked. "Come on, it'll be fun," I replied, grabbing a map from the anthropomorphized corn. Then I linked my arm with his, and the two of us walked into the maze. The corn rose up all around us, about 7 feet tall, maybe taller. Our feet sunk slightly into the muddy ground. In retrospect, it probably wasn't a great idea to go corn mazing after such a heavy rain. But whatever. We were here now. The corn quickly swallowed us up. Within a minute, I could no longer see the entrance, just corn stretching in every direction. A dense forest, choking out all else. As we rounded the bend, the path ended in a T. There was a metal sign, eroded at the edges, planted in the muddy soil, featuring the cartoon corn again. Remember these tips to ensure a fun time at our amazing corn maze. First, shh, don't tell secrets in the maze. The corn has ears. Second, don't stay in the maze after dark. Third, if you're under 13 years old, please stay with a parent or a caregiver at all times. And remember, there are no mirrors in the corn maze. At the bottom of the sign there were 2 arrows, and it read, "Easy Kids Maze, estimated 20 minutes. Challenging Maze, 1 hour." "Can we just do the kids' maze?" Tyler asked. "It's kinda cold." "Yeah, but it's so lame," I replied, looking over the map. "It's literally just a straight line." He sighed. "Fine." So we turned right, following the path into the corn. Our footsteps squelched softly in the mud. So, no mirrors in the corn maze? I asked, trying to start a conversation. What do you think that's supposed to mean? He shrugged. Maybe they want to make it clear that it's not like one of those haunted funhouse things. Like if you see a path, it's real, and not a reflection. I guess. As we walked down the path, an awkward silence fell over us. Okay, I'll admit it. I had an ulterior motive for the trip. Tyler and I had been fighting on and off all week. Just little things here and there, snipping at each other. It was like something in the air had changed between us. Little things were annoying him and me, constantly. Maybe it was the shorter days, the lack of sunlight getting to us. Maybe at almost a year of dating, we were finally coming out of the honeymoon phase. Whatever it was, I felt like the change of scenery would do us some good. Of course, I was starting to regret that now, with the chill creeping into the air and the mud sticking to my sneakers. We probably should have just postponed to next weekend, when it wasn't after a heavy rain. But I felt like I couldn't take one more minute in that apartment. Which way now? Tyler's voice jerked me out of my thoughts. I looked up. Ahead of us, the path split into 3, each path considerably narrower than the one that we were on. I looked down at the map, but I didn't see any places where the path split into 3. I don't know. He raised an eyebrow at me. We're lost already? I looked down at the map again, scanning the schematics. The cartoony ear of corn smiled up at me from the paper, and I wanted to punch it in the face. I don't see any places where it splits in 3, I said, handing him the map. He said, looking it over. Maybe that's part of the challenge. The map is wrong. That would be kind of interesting. Don't they say that if you want to get out of the maze, stick to one side? Like keep your hand touching one of the walls. He stretched his arm out and touched the corn to the right. Yeah. I followed him down the rightmost path. It suddenly seemed darker, probably because the path was about half the width of the previous one, and we were deep in the shadows of the corn. Dry leaves brushed against my arm, feeling more like rough claws raking against my skin. I felt the cold of the mud permeating through my shoes with each step. We passed an intersection, and for a split second, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw someone walking in the other direction. But when I turned my head, nothing was there. I thought I started to Tyler. Then I shook my head. Never mind. Probably just my hair falling in line of my vision. Still, I was starting to really not like this. We made another right, and another, following the wall. We didn't find an exit. More layers of mud caked onto my shoes. I was so tired. Maybe we should just turn around and go home, I called out behind him. He turned around, his eyes lighting up. Really? Yeah, should be easy enough to backtrack. We can just follow our footprints. Sounds good to me, he replied. We turned around and began to follow our footprints back. But 15 or 20 minutes later, we still hadn't found the entrance. We hadn't been here that long. We should be out by now. Are you sure we came this way? I called out, as I followed Tyler down a sharp right turn I didn't remember taking. Has to be, he replied, gesturing to our footprints. But when we turned the corner, we found not one set of footprints, but 2. We were going in circles. This is ridiculous, Tyler huffed. Maybe we should call someone. I pulled out my phone and my heart dropped. It was 5:23 p.m. Over an hour since we had entered the maze. What? Tyler asked, seeing my face drop. I held up my phone. We hadn't been here this long, have we? He paused for a second, then shook his head. We have to follow our footprints out. We'll get out eventually. And if we're really lost, we can call 911 or something. Okay, so which way? I asked. One set of footprints went deep down each path. Left. We're making all the rights before, so it should be lefts to get out. We veered left. The corn seemed to squeeze in on us, the path growing narrower with each step. Like the field of corn was some kind of monster, ready to engulf us at any second. I shook my head and continued forward. There was nothing wrong here. We were just lost in a challenging maze, that's all. But when the path widened, I realized how wrong I was. We were standing in a clearing about the size of my kitchen. There was a sign, the same battered thin metal as before, in the middle. I froze as I began to read. There are 2 ways out of this maze. You can either find your way out on your own, or you can choose to leave behind one person in your party, and the exit will make itself known to you. Either way, make sure you're out of the maze before nightfall, because then, nobody makes it out. The cartoon cornman was painted on the bottom of the sign, grinning up at us. This time, there's a bit of rust or red paint around the mouth. I couldn't tell if it was intentional or not. My heart began to pound. I felt like I couldn't get enough air in my lungs, like a panic attack was about to start. Tyler bursted into laughter behind me. "What? They're trying so hard to make this like a scary ARG or something," he said, laughing. "So lame." I whipped around, arms crossed. "You don't actually believe it, do you?" "All I know is that we've been walking around this maze for an hour, but it's only felt like 20 minutes. And the map doesn't even match the maze. And I don't remember parts of the maze that we've clearly been to because of our footprints are there." I stared at him, panting, my heart pounding in my chest. "Kate, I'm sorry. You're really scared, huh? And so are you." "I saw how scared you looked when you realized we were going in circles, but now you're just gonna pass it off and pretend it's all a game?" "Kate, I want to get out of here," I shouted. "Whatever this is, game or not, I hate it and I want to go home." Tyler put up his hands defensively. "Whoa, okay, I'm sorry. Let's just keep going left and we'll get out, I promise." Huffing, I cut in front of him and veered down the left path, leading the way. My shoes squelched loudly. The path narrowed again, corn clawing at my shoulders and hips. We curved left and right, and then, to my relief, the path opened up wider in front of us. "We're out. The hope leaked out of me like a deflating balloon. The path did open up into a much larger area, a clearing, like the last one. But I hadn't remembered seeing the clearing, despite the footprints trailing all over it. Our footprints. Crisscrossing, frantic, some clearly made by us running. The depressions in the mud deep and smudged. I turned around. No, Tyler wasn't behind me. My legs went weak underneath me. "Tyler!" I shouted. The path curved behind me, disappearing into the darkness. No sign of Tyler. I scanned the corn surrounding the clearing, but it was dark and shadowy and infinite, stretching in every direction. "Tyler!" The corn rustled somewhere to my left. I glanced over, but I couldn't see anything. The corn was too dense, the shadows too dark. The sky was darkening now, threatening dusk. It was nearly pitch black in the shadows of the cornfield. I stared at the mess of footprints on the ground. What the hell is going on? I pulled out my phone and called Tyler. It rang several times, then voicemail picked up. Shoot. I called him a second time, and a third. He didn't pick up. For a while I just stood there, calling his name. The sky deepened to a dark blue above me. The corn rustled in the breeze, stretching in every direction. Birds soared to their nest, chirping, then the chittering of bats overhead filled the silence. There were two paths at either end of the clearing, one curving left, one curving right. Now they were pitch black, like looking into the deepest of forest, choking out every last bit of light. I turned on my phone's flashlight and swept it down into the entrances of each, but nothing appeared to be there. Just stalks and stalks of corn, all lines and shadows overlapping each other. And then, finally, I heard something. Somewhere down the path from just out of my view, I heard a soft whimpering sound. Tyler? A rough whisper. Kate. I approached the path, my heart pounding in my ears. I held the phone out in front of me, lighting up the path. Tyler? I whispered. And then, I saw the blood. The patch of wet and dark mingling with the mud. I swept my flashlight over the corn. The beam of light fell on the bloody hand, lying in the mud just a few feet within the corn. I jerked the flashlight back, revealing an arm, and then Tyler's face. He was so pale. His eyes were wide. His cheeks were smeared with blood. "Kate," he groaned. A horrible gurgling sound mingled with his voice. "I'm coming. I'm gonna get you out of there." I tried to force my way through the corn, but it was impossible. They were planted only 6 inches, maybe a foot apart. I didn't have the strength to bend or snap them. "Tyler, what happened? He didn't get the chance to tell me. I watched in horror as his body began to slide backwards through the corn, as if something was dragging him. "Tyler!" I screamed. The sound of corn stalks snapping filled the air. I frantically shone my flashlight into the corn, sweeping it in every direction, but all I saw was more and more corn, everywhere, filling up every square inch of space. I ran back through the clearing, back down one of the paths, pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "My boyfriend and I are in a corn maze, and he's hurt. I think there might be someone out there, and..." "Slow down, please," the woman said. "You said you're at a corn maze?" Her tone sounded skeptical. "Yeah. Where?" "Twilight Creek Farms." A beat of silence. "Do you know the punishment for calling emergency services when there is no emergency?" she asked, her voice sharp. "What?" "Prank calls can put you in jail for a year. Did you know that?" I stared at the corn, my throat closing. "What? This isn't a prank call. My boyfriend is really hurt. I think someone is..." "Ma'am," she cut off. "The Twilight Creek Farms has been closed for over 3 months now, ever since the bodies were found." All the air sucked out of my lungs. "Bodies?" I croaked. "We've gotten over 24 calls since then, claiming that someone's in trouble," she replied, condescendingly. "But the entire farm was razed since they lost all their money in the wrongful dead suit. So what kind of game you're trying to play?" I trailed off. Three months? "Uh-huh." What month is it?" A scoff. "January." The phone fell from my hands. This can't be real. I must be dreaming. I wheeled around, the wide of my phone's flashlight sweeping over the corn. The path curved away into darkness, deeper into the corn. I snatched my phone off the ground and walked back towards the clearing, but it wasn't there. Like the corn had swallowed it up, grown in its place in the span of minutes. What the freak is going on here? The sound of footsteps jerked me out of my daze. Squelch. Getting louder. Coming closer. Squelch. I turned the flashlight off and began running in a random direction. I took every left turn, keeping against the wall of corn, praying I would find an exit. I tried calling 911 again and again, but no one ever picked up. They must have flagged my number as some sort of prank call. The farm has to have some sort of safety system in place. They let kids come in here. They have to search the maze before they close up for the night. They wouldn't just let people die in here. I stopped to catch my breath. My lungs burned. I couldn't run anymore. I just couldn't. I stood halfway bent over in the middle of the narrow path, the corn impossibly close, sucking in lung after lung of icy air. "Kate." Tyler's voice, incredibly quiet, barely a whisper from somewhere in front of me. I began running blindly towards him. The path zigzagged left then right. And then I saw him. Tyler was standing at the end of the path, facing away from me. His form illuminated in the silver moon's light, the shadows of corn crisscrossing over his back. "Tyler," I whispered. I ran towards him, but halfway there I stopped. Something is wrong. He wasn't turning around to look at me, wasn't moving at all. Tyler? Nothing. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Hand shaking, I lifted it up. No. It was wearing his clothes, but it wasn't him. It was a Scarecrow. Hay poked out of the neckline of the shirt, out of the cuffs of his jeans. His hands were just bunches of hay, girdled with twine. Stray pieces of hay scattered the ground, falling out of his hiking boots, but wait, that didn't make sense, because he had hair. Undeniably was his hair, wavy and black. The gears in my brain spun, trying to figure out what exactly was going on, trying to interpret this thing standing in front of me, stuffed with hay, with his clothes, his hair. And then, I realized it. The body was a scarecrow, but his head wasn't. I could see Tyler's pale ears, the blood dripping onto the hay of his neck. I opened my mouth to scream. The stalks of corn rustled and snapped, shaking violently as something moved within them. And then, it emerged. A scarecrow, moving in jerky, stilted movements towards me, holding a silver-long blade dripping with blood, missing a head. I took off down the path, my feet pounded underneath me. My lungs burned. I tried to keep right because I'd been going left the other way. Did that even make sense? But everything blurred and smeared in my mind. All I saw was corn, endless rows of it, lit by the moonlight. Pitch black shadows underneath it, a silver moon hanging overhead, bats twirling and tilting through the air. After what felt like hours of running, I finally accepted my fate. I'm never getting out of here, and neither is Tyler. Somehow I evaded the scarecrow all night. Before I knew it, the sun was rising. I thought I'd finally found salvation when I heard voices on the other side of the corn, but then I realized what they were saying. "Are you sure you want to do this? Come on, it'll be fun." It was our voices. I screamed until I was hoarse, telling them, us, to stay away. I screamed for help. I tried everything. I clawed my way through the corn, towards where I heard them, because clearly they were at the entrance, but all I found was more and more corn. It was futile. At one point I think I broke through for just an instant, but then I watched her shake her head and say, "Never mind." Time passes strangely here, with all our days in the cornfield overlapping each other. Rows upon rows of our footprints cross the dirt, from an eternity of running from the scarecrow. Every time I try to stop Tyler from getting taken, and every time I fail. And then there's always the night. I spend every night evading the headless scarecrow. I know my own fate. I know it was bodies, not a body, that was found in the cornfield. I know I don't make it out alive, but I evade her anyways, hiding in the corn, deluding myself that I stay alive long enough that maybe I'll get out. I'm sure it's been more than a few months now, but the moon rises all the same, hanging silver over the corn. The stalks rustle and snap. I hide in the corn, my breathing fast and heavy, praying that one day I will find a way out. I know that that day will never come.